From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has responded to U.S. Vice President Mike Pence after he criticized the upcoming election in Venezuela. Maduro said it is for the Venezuelan people to choose their president in direct and open elections. Wearing an indigenous hairdress with feathers, Maduro was accompanied by members of the indigenous community in the state of Amazonas, and he asked for their blessing and support.
El pueblo unido.
The people united will never be defeated.
Así debemos estar siempre.
That's how we should always be. The people united, mobilized with a great conscience of what we're defending. The rights of the whole country. The right to have a future. On May 20th, we'll decide that. If Venezuela continues to be a free, sovereign and independent country, or if it becomes colony belonging to the U.S. and those who want to betray the nation.
Venezuelan independent candidate Luis Ratti has endorsed leading opposition presidential contender Henry Falcón. At a joint event, Falcón and Ratti called on the two other opposition candidates, Javier Bertucci and Reinaldo Quijada, to put the interests of Venezuela above personal ones. He urged the contenders to join forces to run against leading candidate Nicolás Maduro.
And I guarantee, by God, on my word, that he will be the best president that Venezuela has had in the last 20 years of its history. Henry Falcón, my brother.
And so here I also want to call on other candidates. I refer to candidate Quijada and candidate Bertucci. Dear brothers, we are at a historic moment. Before our country, we will leave a mark for future generations. We cannot bet on nothing. It is the hour for true unity.
The Venezuelan president Nicolás Maduro says that if he wins the election on May 20th, he will start a broad national dialogue and restart talks with the opposition, which took place in the Dominican Republic. Our correspondent in Caracas, Ian Bruce, has sent us this report explaining how the government is implementing election guarantees demanded by the opposition during the last round of talks in Santo Domingo, even though at the last minute the opposition refused to sign the agreement.
Venezuelans rehearse for the election of a new president and regional assemblies on the 20th of May. After more than 20 elections since the beginning of the Bolivarian Revolution in 1998, voting has become something of a habit here.
All of the expert electoral bodies of the continent have been witness since 2004 to the way we have automated the electoral process and implemented ever greater guarantees so that the electorate can trust their electoral system.
But these elections are different. They include additional guarantees, precisely those demanded by the opposition. And they've been brought forward also as the opposition requested. To understand why, we need to go back a couple of years. After Venezuela's opposition parties won control of the National Assembly in December 2015, they proposed a three-pronged strategy to get rid of the Bolivarian government. Street protests, increasingly violent ones, were intended to bring down the government. They also called for a recall referendum to remove President Nicolás Maduro. And they insisted on immediate presidential elections. By July 2017, with the election of a constituent assembly, the first two plans had failed. The opposition was left with its call for an immediate presidential election. They said they couldn't wait until the scheduled date of December 2018. The government launched a new attempt at dialogue in the Dominican Republic, mediated by the former Spanish Premier José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero. In December that year, the opposition finally joined the talks. By this February, the two sides seemed to have reached an agreement, which had elections as one central point. The government agreed to almost all the new guarantees sought by the opposition. For the first time, international observers will be invited from the United Nations and other international bodies. All candidates will be ensured equal access to the media. That included an acceptance by President Maduro to suspend his presidential broadcasts, known as cadenas, long a feature of Venezuelan political life. The Electoral Authority would return to their original location those voting centres moved as a result of violent protests. The opposition had argued this prejudiced their supporters. There were also agreements to provide security for all the candidates.
The Santo Domingo Agreement, the agreement of democratic and peaceful coexistence, was not signed by the opposition at the last moment. What's more, it included as the new element to bring forward the elections, which the opposition agreed. In fact, they are the ones that asked for it. But then the government asked if they were ready to guarantee that they would recognize the results.
The opposition now decided it would boycott the elections unless they were moved back to December, the date it had previously rejected. President Maduro said he would implement the agreement anyway, including the extra electoral guarantees.
And I will fulfill all of its parts. Here's the agreement made in the Dominican Republic.
This is one man who has benefited from the opposition's comings and goings. Henry Falcon, the main opposition figure who decided to run for the presidency, says the abstentionist parties are destined to disappear. Ian Bruce, Telesur, Caracas.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has urged Latin American countries not to relocate their embassies to Jerusalem and to avoid following in the footsteps of the United States. During a meeting with Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, Abbas said this move goes against international law. Maduro condemned the U.S. decision to move their diplomatic offices to Jerusalem and asked for Palestine to be accepted as a country of the United Nations. The U.S. Embassy is expected to open in Jerusalem on May 14th. Abbas' request comes after Paraguay announced it will also move its embassy to Jerusalem by the end of May. A Paraguayan spokesperson confirmed President Horacio Cartes will travel to Israel for the move. Guatemala is also moving its embassy to Jerusalem on May 16th. In Argentina, President Mauricio Macri says he has asked the International Monetary Fund for financial support. Macri is negotiating with the IMF for a $30 billion credit line as the nation's bonds, stocks, and currency all plunged. He said the government's fiscal plan depends a lot on external financing and that due to changes in the international context, they need help from international organizations.
I'm convinced that we are following the only path we have to overcome difficult times and avoid an economic crisis that could harm our nation. In order to do this, we have applied a gradualistic economic policy to balance the disastrous public accounts, taking care of the most vulnerable people and at the same time developing more jobs opportunities for all. This economic policy depends on international investment. During the first 2 years, we had a positive global context, but this has changed. The global economic conditions are more challenging for us since the rise of oil prices and global interest rates. These external factors harm our economy because we are a country that depends exclusively on international investment after the enormous public debt left by the past administration. As a result, I have decided to hold talks with the International Monetary Fund to reach an agreement and obtain financing support to work on new economic development programs.
Meanwhile, some are saying Argentina's currency crisis reveals just how fragile Macri's neoliberal economic policies really are.
The rise of the dollar price in recent days is shaking Argentina's economy, in spite of the government promises to take action to deal with the situation. For example, increasing bank interest rates to 40%. The value of food and other necessities are rapidly outpricing workers' salaries, drawing the country deeper into recession.
They are taking us down a road that they know that leads to worse days. Government policies are not moving forward, and that's something deeply concerning.
The instability of the dollar makes it harder to achieve the fiscal goals for this year. The government tries to reduce the cost of the dollar by making cuts of $30 billion in the public budget. However, many analysts think that the problems won't stop.
All of this shows us how imbalanced the situation with the dollar is. This is mainly a financial bomb. purposefully installed by the central bank, and they justify it with the fight against inflation, which already failed with a fragile economy built by the government.
The leaks in the economy just won't stop, and this fiscal disorder is just making things worse. The price of the dollar is already the same as in 2001. Meanwhile, as the central bank struggles to control the situation, the country has lost $5.3 billion from its national reserves, and more than $7.7 billion since they started financial measures in March.
This crisis comes during a time when big finance comes and goes from Argentina. This makes a dramatic economic turn that forces the government to apply even worse policies that will reduce the budget for public works and will make the interest rates even bigger, complicating things for the manufacturing sector and smaller companies.
Even if Macri overcomes these issues, the economic crisis will take its toll. The increase of the dollar's value will have terrible consequences with regards to economic activities. Since January, inflation increased by 7.4%, and it is expected that by the end of the year, it will be as high as 24%. This is a deeply concerning situation for the Argentine economy.
European leaders have criticized U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. Going against advice from European allies, President Trump said he was reimposing full economic sanctions on Iran and pulling the United States out of the international agreement. This leaves any foreign companies trying to do business with Iran in a difficult position. And following the announcement from Trump, other signatories of the Iran nuclear deal, including France, Germany, and Britain, have said they will not withdraw from the deal. In a joint statement from Emmanuel Macron, Angela Merkel, and Theresa May, they urged Donald Trump to avoid taking action which will obstruct the implementation of the nuclear accord. They also said they regret Trump's decision. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Nicaraguan student groups say they are ready to begin talks with the government on how to maintain peace following violent protests. 5 students from the National Coalition of Nicaraguan University Students will take part in the dialogue, although authorities have not yet set a date for the talks. Students presented their demands to state officials, calling for justice and national democratization. The delegation also requested the rule of law to be reinstated. The protest sparked by proposals to reform the social security system, which have now been abandoned. In Guatemala, thousands of teachers have camped outside the National Palace in the capital city to demand an increase in the education budget. The camp is putting pressure on President Jimmy Morales to stick to a collective agreement on working conditions signed 3 months ago. The agreement included a salary increase that has not been fulfilled, so Guatemalan teachers have been on strike for 2 weeks. The camp is supposed to last at least 48 hours.
We feel cheated, we feel offended, and the worst thing is that they want to deceive us into thinking that we are supporting the government, that we are supporting this when this is a right, and they are the ones who took us out of the classrooms.
And in Brazil, police have confirmed that student and LGBTI activist Mateus Passarelli was killed in Rio de Janeiro. Our correspondent Andre Veira in Rio de Janeiro has the details.
Rio de Janeiro's police force has confirmed that the 21-year-old art student Mateus Passarelli, who was reported missing since April 9th, was reported to be in one of the poorest favelas in the city. She was killed by a gang organization that controlled the favela. This situation comes after the military intervention of Rio, which raised many concerns since they cannot prevent crimes like the one against Passarelli or the atrocious attack against Maria Franco. In fact, the crime rates against LGBTQI community members have risen by 30% since 2016, and even more so after the militarization of the city.
Thank you, Ander, for that report. The president of Ecuador, Lenin Moreno, has demanded that his entire cabinet resign in order to evaluate their performance and political stance as he is about to end his first year in office. Moreno's personal secretary announced that on Twitter, owing to the fact that several of Moreno's ministers had served in the former administration of President Rafael Correa, with whom Moreno has had strong differences. 2 weeks ago, Moreno replaced the ministers of Defense and the Interior over the crisis on the Colombian border. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel and the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres have welcomed leaders to the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, or ECLAC, summit in Havana. Representatives from over 20 countries from the continent are in Cuba to discuss issues including sustainable development and inequality. Delegates attended a forum in the Convention Palace in Havana, where leaders presented a new development plan for the region. The Peruvian Amazon is getting smaller. Experts are worried that the area is losing around 120,000 hectares of forest each year. Between 2001 and 2016, the Peruvian Amazon forest lost almost 2 million hectares, according to the National Program for the Conservation of Forests. In one of the most affected areas, the Madre de Dios, on the border with Brazil and Bolivia, deforestation tripled from 5,000 hectares in 2001 to 17,000 hectares in 2016. Cattle farming, illegal chopping of trees, drug trafficking, and illegal mining are the main issues.
For instance, after illegal mining, you're not going to recover the ecosystem, but you can stop the cause so that it doesn't continue to expand or so that it's restricted.
In Chile, President Sebastián Piñera has proposed a legislation to the Congress to ban plastic shopping bags nationwide. President Piñera has started a campaign with the hashtag Buy Plastic Bags, or Chao Bolsas Plásticas in Spanish, to raise environmental awareness. The aim is to protect the planet by reducing the use of these items that pollute the environment and are harmful for animals and human beings' health. It is estimated that as many as 3,400 million bags cycle through the Chilean commercial market. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
They don't believe. They think that you're just a stranger I'm calling to verify the story.
It's like 3 black people stealing stuff.
Stealing stuff?
Yeah. Like breaking into the house and taking
No, we're taking our suitcases out of the house.
Right, they said like luggage and stuff.
Because there's 3 black people in the neighborhood, of course.
It's possible, but like I said, you never know.
It's not.
Standing out here with the Rialto police, who were called by a neighbor. They don't believe that we went. Well, can you explain who you are before I preface?
Fitness C caucus. Been had multiple problems with this club. Got my membership right here. I scanned in. I was asked to scan in again for no reason. I'm the only person in the gym they asked to scan again. We got the police here. See, what's your name?
Cover all our bases.
You guys are investigating. I have a lot of shit to do today. I have an event that we're doing.
Welcome back. Russia has displayed its most advanced and sophisticated weaponry during a military parade in Moscow in honor of their 1945 victory over Nazi Germany. Around 3,000 troops marched past the Red Square to mark the Victory Day. The highlight of the parade was Russia's new hypersonic missile, which President Vladimir Putin recently described as invincible. Altogether, the parade featured 159 types of hardware, including 75 aircrafts. The celebration comes days after Putin began his 4th term in office.
War is always a challenge to life itself, to everything good in it. We remember the tragedy of 2 world wars, the lessons of history. They do not let us go blind. Behind new threats, one can see the same old ugly features: selfishness and intolerance, aggressive nationalism and claims for exceptionalism.
Ebola outbreak has been confirmed in Dominican Republic of Congo. Here's more on that and other stories making headlines from around the world.
Due to Ebola virus in Northwest Democratic Republic of Congo. It is the 9th time Ebola has outbroken in the country. Last year, the virus killed 8 people. The worst Ebola epidemic ended in West Africa 2 years ago after killing more than 11,000 people and infecting around 28,000 across Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Nigeria, Mali, and the United States. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is hosting his Chinese counterpart Li Keqiang and South Korean President Moon Jae-in in Tokyo in preparation for a summit between the US and North Korea. It is the first time a Chinese premier has visited Japan in 8 years. The main focus of the trilateral meeting is to push for North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons. The 3 leaders want to make sure they are not left out when a deal between Washington and Pyongyang is signed.
We should pursue all efforts towards the complete, verifiable and irreversible dismantling of North Korea's weapons of mass destruction and missiles, in accordance with the UN resolutions.
Malaysians have voted on Wednesday for the country's 14th general election in what is seen as a highly contested poll. The ruling Barisan Nasional coalition, led by incumbent Prime Minister Najib Razak, is facing a stiff competition from the opposition alliance, Pakatan Harapan. The ruling right-wing party Barisan Nasional has been in power since the country gained independence in 1957. Results are expected to be out by Wednesday night.
And we end our news show with a 38-year-old Russian quadruple amputee diver who has set a new world record by plunging 40 meters down into the Red Sea. Dmitry Pavlenko lost his arms and legs as a result of the grenade explosion at the age of 19. However, he went on to receive a diploma in psychology and developed a keen interest in diving. Although he was supervised by 5 other divers, none of them were allowed to touch him unless he showed signs of trouble. Pavlenko believes this is his way of encouraging others to see that there are no limits to what they can achieve, whether it is an amputee or an able-bodied person. And we've come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.